Okay, we in it. Good morning, good afternoon, whatever time you woke up. I felt quote unquote inspired to, I guess you could say, continuing some conversations about creativity. So, this one is about inspiration. Being inspired. What is inspiration? How do we stay inspired? How do we capture inspiration? The thing about creativity for me is I forgot to hit record. The thing about creativity for me that I think is, I guess you could say personal, because inspiration is personal for all of us. I just don't think we look at it that way. You ever have that time, that moment where you are trying to write something, maybe write a script, maybe write a book, and it's that damn dotted line that just haunts you, it scares you, and it's just staring at you in such a way that it's, what do I do? You lack inspiration. You don't know what you're supposed to write, or where do these thoughts come from. And being involved in various creative areas and realms and different crafts and careers, it's a challenging thing, but it's also a really important thing on how you as a creative person operate in capturing inspiration. Whether that's going to be something that you do live, or whether that's something you do later, whether that's something that you do in the moment, or whether it's something that you create in the moment and then put out to the world. Either way, I think inspiration within the terms of creativity is something that we all struggle with. So, by the way, sorry it took so long to get started. These guys are cutting the grass, and that's not helpful when you're trying to do a live. Anyways, what we're talking about, inspiration. Just to pre-warn you, yeah, I got ADD, and kind of helps my creative process in a lot of ways, but when it comes to other people, definitely does not help with an organized thought. So if you're expecting an organized thought, you may not get it from me. But my mind just wanders, and that just is what it is. I don't fight it anymore. I'm not ashamed of it. I have it. It adds to my life. Okay, I know some people watching are just doing that. All right, so I want to start with this. Recently, for inspiration, my wife got me wind chimes. Wind chimes is actually something that I really love. My parents have it at their house in Georgia. Their old house, on the deck, they would have these wind chimes. In Georgia, it's in a wooded area, so there's a lot more wind than per se where I live in South Florida. I mean, if you go by the beach, there's plenty of wind, but I don't live close to the beach at all. So I got these wind chimes, and as I'm interacting with them, I just realized how inspired they make me. Not necessarily because of just the sound of wind chimes, but just what wind chimes actually do, what they are. For me, when I think about it, when I look at it, a wind chime is just being. A wind chime doesn't actually have to do anything. It just is there, right? So it's not like a wind chime. It's like, I'm a wind chime, ding, ding, ding. It's not making its own music, right? But they're just there. It's available. It's present. And because it's there and it's available and it's present, then as the wind moves, then it makes its beautiful music. There's like this, I guess you could say, an interesting interaction that the wind chimes that I recently got have with just being in its own nature, but then also being in nature. The wind just goes, but the wind chimes aren't doing anything. They're just open and they're available. And they receive wind, and it makes beautiful music. And for me, that's so much of where my life is, so much of where my creative process is. And I find that what we struggle with when it comes to the idea of inspiration, capturing inspiration, is this idea that we have to create things. Like, oh, I gotta sit down and I gotta create. Okay, let me go to a session and be creative. Let me be the creative person. And the problem with that way of thinking, one, it's a lot of pressure that randomly you don't need or should put on yourself. But the other side of it is that's not really how creativity and ideas work. They don't operate that way. You have to understand that inspiration is not something that you do, right? Ideas are not something that you necessarily develop Okay, let me rephrase that. They're not something that you just create. You can't go and create an idea. Like the wind chimes that I was talking about. Wind chimes are things that are just there and they're available to what passes through. So you yourself just have to allow yourself to be available for inspiration. Now, I don't want to get too deep over philosophical, even though naturally I'm going to go that way. But you have to really understand that, like, when you go to create something and you try to force yourself to create, it's, as the monks would say, it's using the monkey, right, to suppress and control the monkey, which at the end of the day is just using the monkey. So it's very counterintuitive to the very concept of just being still and being present. So within inspiration, one thing that I realized over the years is that I actually can't come up with an idea. I can only stumble upon an idea. I can only bump into inspiration. I don't cultivate, create inspiration. Something I'm going to say later on may contradict that, but I don't come up with inspiration, an idea, right? It's something that I can only stumble upon. I can only bump into it. So for example, before COVID, I was traveling a lot, and traveling in itself is such an inspirational thing. Not just because of, like, let me get a ticket and go see new things, but you are literally seeing ideas and creativity from people that you would not normally interact with. You're interacting with a culture that is not your own home, and that in itself is inspiring, inspirational. But again, this isn't me creating. This is me bumping into it, making myself available to it. And maybe it's not travel. Maybe it's also at home. My wife and I, we decided to take this back room. How do you put it? What would you call this thing? This is technically our studio where we do work, but we decided we don't want this to be our studio anymore. We just want this to be, we call it the Brave Cave because we call our son Bodhi the Brave. And we want this space to just be a creative space, a space where we just feel creative. So my wife's going to make this very retro, very nostalgic. It's going to be filled with our music. We're getting records with the things that we grew up with. We want it to be a space that feels like a basement, like we're just hanging out in this space. And as we're in this space, we see things that inspire us. Like I have a picture. So I just got this album. I guess you could say album, a record album. What would you call it? I got this record of West Side Story, like back in the day, vintage West Side Story. And for me, West Side Story is one of my favorite movies of all time. I talked about it a little bit yesterday, but just seeing it reminds me of the inspiration that it gave me as a child. All right, what that's called planting inspiration. You plant it, actually in acting, you plant your inspiration in certain areas of your scene in your script. It's a pretty awesome technique. But I plant this in my house. I would turn the camera, but then I'd have to get up and move the lighting, and we're not going to do that. So you plant it so that when you see it, it just is a reminder. It's a reminder of inspiration. I remember how this movie made me want to dance when I was 5, 6 years old. Made me want to get into filmmaking as a teenager. I mean, it's done so much for me, but it's just one of those things. And then we have records of all of our music. I'm a music collector, and I can't say that I'm a vinyl collector, because when I got into DJing just wasn't something at the time where everybody was doing vinyl records. They were transitioning from vinyl records into CDs, and then later on it became digital. So I was in that transitional period, right? So I have books and crates of just CDs all the way from like late 90s to current. And just sometimes picking them up reminds me of a moment, an idea, an inspiration. But we're building this room, rebuilding it as a place of inspiration, to always be inspired by your ideas. Again, inspiration is not something that you just sit down and do. Inspiration is something you bump into, something that you make yourself available to. So lately, when I have this self-creative session, and I'm like, I want to write something. I want to write a script. I want to write some ideas for skits. Maybe I want to write a monologue. Maybe I want to write different ideas that I can bring forth via the company, or maybe I could do it in and through video form. I don't know. My mind is all over the place, but I need a bit of structure, right? Now this is where it gets complete opposite of what I'm talking about. I need to create a structure for myself to build upon this inspiration. So the structure for me is having like my own creative session. But in the creative session, I'm not going in there with this idea that I'm going to create. I sit down to be inspired. So sometimes I'll sit down on the couch and I'll just put on YouTube and I'll just watch things. And I'll just make myself readily available. Oh, that's a good thought. Oh, that's a cool idea. Oh, I see what they did there. Maybe I'll sit down and I'll read a book. Maybe I have this book, it's a book of quotes and a book of poems, and I'll just read the poems and I'll just grab them, read them out loud, and I'll say, oh, that's a cool idea. That's another one. And I'll document these ideas. And I'll do this from time to time. Maybe I'll do it and I won't even necessarily write anything as far as like in a structured format, but I'm creating a block of time and space for me to be inspired. So one thing that I think is really important as creatives is, side note, I remember this, one of my friends from Sweden, they came out to visit, and as they were, we would hang out, and then she would always write down on the back of a receipt whenever she bought something. Now she's a dancer and she's an artist, and she wrote on the receipt so she can write it off later on. She would say inspiration, and I was like, you can write off inspiration? And then she would tell me, yeah, that's a huge part of my work, is being inspired. And I guess in that idea, you know, you don't realize how you don't make time for inspiration. You need to create time and space in your life for inspiration. And that's not like being careless or irresponsible. It's just knowing that there's an importance of. But I think it's really important within the same statement to make sure that as you're doing this, you're not approaching this with this idea that I'm gonna go be inspired. Like, you know, you just know, you know what, I'm gonna go. And I might be inspired, I might not. I'm just gonna go, and this is the key word, experience. I'm just gonna go and experience. Because one thing that I'm realizing within creativity in itself, it's just experience. It's life experience. How'd you come up with that idea? Actually, I remember when I was younger, I did XYZ. That was a life experience. You have to have an experience for inspiration to go forward into what it is that you're trying to create. But as you are trying to create, you can't think of it as that you are going to sit down and you are going to build this and create. You're just going to stumble upon it. And then this is what happens, and I actually learned this within dance. When you're dancing, you have creative sessions, and these creative sessions you come up with ideas, right? Let me try this move. Oh, that connects well with this. Oh, let me try this one. Oh, you know what? Next time I'm gonna actually train and work on this technique. I'm gonna work on this technique. Another day, okay, let me just freestyle. Let me see what happens. And you just kind of go. You let go and you allow this process to happen. Then 2, 3, maybe even a month, maybe a couple more weeks than a month go by, and now you have a collection of ideas, okay? This is why I think it's so important to document your process, but also your creativity. In dance, a lot of people argue this, but I think it's a huge part of dance culture, which is documenting your progress so that you can build creative ideas. I have a book, and also in my notes, I just write shit down. I might be walking around downtown, I might be walking my dog or hanging out with my son, and I'll stumble upon something. Look, a rock, look, an owl, I don't know, whatever, a squirrel, which is like my brain. I just write shit down. And then those ideas just come about, and they come naturally, but I have no intention of what the idea is gonna play out later on. I just write them down. Later on, when I actually want to sit down and create, I'm not creating from a blank slate. I'm now creating from a documented process. You have to give yourself a process. So within everything that I'm saying, there's an openness, there's a nothingness, there's an unknownness, there's also a wandering and an experiential aspect of creativity, but then there's also the structure. It's how you as a creative person can put your ideas forward. It's you as a creative person. How do I document? How do I collect my ideas? It's like a montage, right? It's just a bunch of footage that you look at and you just figure out how you're gonna piece this all together. So again, just to reiterate that last couple topics, I guess that last couple statements is being open and available experientially to creativity and being open to it and not forcing it, but just stumbling upon it. Again, just to reiterate, you don't create ideas, you only stumble upon ideas. So the most creative people that you bump into, it's not because, oh, they have such an intellectual mind of they're such a creative person. No, it's because they're just an open, probably very relaxed, probably very open-minded, very calm, very peaceful person. Now, that's not all the time, but for the most part, a lot of the creative people that I've ever bumped into, they are some of the most grounded individuals on earth. And when I say grounded, I mean they are here, they are present, they are a part of the creative process, meaning they're just living. Now, in conversation with that is taking all that experience and being present and being open, and then how do I structure it and how do I document, how do I remember it? And documentation, I think, is so important because it's just like solving problems, like anything. Sometimes you just need to write shit down so you can visually see it. If you go upstairs into my office, on my desk is this huge board that you could write on, but it's the actual desk. And what it is that I got this old desk a while back, and the top of it was made to write on. So when I got rid of the desk, I just kept the top and I put it on my new desk. And then behind me are these boards where I just write things. I write ideas. Sometimes I'll use it for remembering scripts. Sometimes I'll use it for creating ideas. A lot of times I'll sit down with clients and I'll write down their ideas or what their intentions and their desires are, and we'll just go at it and we'll just write shit down. And then over time we'll look at it like, oh look, all these ideas connect. In the same way as I was talking about with dance and practicing dance, it's the same type of a process. You're just documenting ideas, concepts, and then from there, from that aspect, not only do you document them, but then you can now visually see them, because documenting, writing things down, having them in front of you is a huge part in how you collect and organize your ideas. So again, yes, go out, experience, and then write that shit down. Take a picture of it. Sometimes just going and like, oh, I'm gonna take a picture of this. If you look through my phone, I just have a bunch of random things. Sometimes it's a screenshot. Sometimes it is just taking photos. Sometimes the video of things. I love documenting, again, because it's a part of the culture I'm from, but also I love documenting because it helps with my creative process. Sometimes in not knowing what to do, I'll just go back to old footage. I have footage documented from, oh my gosh, I have tapes from the 90s. I have footage from 2000 I have a drive 2000 to 2007. And then from there, I have a driver every year since, which is not suggested because that's just a lot of money in hard drives. I totally should probably just invest in actual, a big drive or something like that, but that's a lot of money too. Okay, so I just riffed. What did I miss here? Yes. Okay, when it comes to space, creating space, we could do it in two ways. We could do physical space, like actual space, and we can also do physical space. We could do space in your life. I think when it comes to inspiration, you do need to block out time and energy for it. Sometimes even too, like I'm realizing as an actor, you can't sit there and just figure out the idea that, or the approach, or the choice, the creative choice that you want to make for a scene. And sometimes it's not even based off of, let me go get inspired by somebody else. Sometimes it's just wandering, going to the park. Sometimes it's going to the beach. Sometimes it's just observing humanity and being like, oh, I like how this person reacted in this moment. And that's just something that actually happened. And then, oh, that's how I want to approach this part of my scene. That is a huge part of the work, is observing humanity. And that's a part of acting, but it's also a part of the creative process, making time to just observe. And we live in a culture that is so like, go, let's move on, that we don't really give ourselves the permission to just be and just observe. And I think it's really important to create actual space and time to do it. So yes, we talked earlier, create an actual space in your home. to have. Whenever I perform, DJing, even in dance, I always try to rock a fresh hat. My fedora game is sick. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, it's okay. But for me, wearing fedoras is an inspiration because some of the greats artists that I look up to always wore the magic hat. Of course, Michael Jackson. For me, Free from Circle of Fire, my big brother, and I'm part of Soul Shifters, but I guess you could say our big brother branch is Circle of Fire. So Free, for me, when I first started dancing at age 14, 15, I saw Lords of the Floor by Red Bull, and Free was wearing this fresh cap, and he was just going like this, and then you see his movements, and they were completely unorthodox to the culture and what normally people would do, and that inspired me as a kid. So now, even to this age, in my mid-30s, I still wear the fedora. One, it reminds me of being a kid, but two, it inspires different types of movements, okay? That's planting inspiration. That's creating an inspired environment internally and externally, okay? That's why, they say style is everything. Like creating the actual character on the physical aspect. I'm not just talking about dance, I'm talking about acting, I'm talking about DJ, I'm talking about creativity itself. Creating the actual character, man, that's so key. Little Louis Vega, who is probably one of my biggest inspirations as a DJ. I remember one time I was DJing at this club, and I was in it, and I was wearing. No, it was my black hat. It was a hat. It was a black hat, and I was wearing that hat, and as I was DJing, I saw like a shadow behind me, I guess, and it had like this type of view and feel, and as I was in it, I got like really like there's only certain people that that would wear a fresh hat like that, and I look back and it's Louis Vega standing behind me, and I got a little starstruck, but I also got like, man, what an honor it is to have someone that you look up to standing right behind you, and in that moment I went off. I dove into the set, and we did the thing, and it was so much fun. But again, this is a reminder of the inspiration going forth, the people that came before me, that I can pass on, the magic of the hat, the magic of the fresh fedora. And there's a couple other people. Carmen Sandiego, one of my all-time favorite characters since childhood. For her, you never knew where she was. You never knew, and you never knew what she was going to do next. She was so mysterious. But whenever you saw her hat, you knew it was her. You knew it was her work. And that's kind of the inspiration that goes forth in my own work. I don't really know what's going to happen next. I don't really know what my next project is going to be. I don't really like to have this, like, I guess you could say, structured schedule, which a lot of people don't like about my life. Sorry. But I like this, like, where's he going to be next? What did he do? And it comes from me because the hat. And that's just me. And maybe people don't get it. I don't know. But that's me playing that character. That's me living and planting inspiration in my own creativity. A lot of times I drink from this coffee mug. This is something that I made at Artsy Hive in Miami. And I did it right before, a couple months before I became a father. I don't know if you've ever seen Hook, and in Hook there's this is a happy thought, and for Robin Williams playing Peter Pan, his happy thought was that he always wanted to be a dad. That was his happy thought. That's what made him fly. And for me, if you know my backstory, being adopted, and not only within adoption, but also a reason for being adopted is my biological father passed away. So that is something that's very sensitive to me, very real, very personal to me. So being a father is my happy thought. It's something that I've always wanted in my life. Now, I did have a father that raised me, who adopted me, but as far as that story, fatherhood itself is such a personal thing to me. So when I hold this coffee mug, I can even touch like the texture, right? That says dad in there. And I remember making it, and I remember how happy I was in the moment of creating it, and being inspired, and I couldn't wait to be a dad. And even now, everything that I do, from my business to stuff like this to creating, even pursuing acting, it is all for my son. It is all for my family. Being a father is just my happy place. A lot of people will have their opinions on how involved you should be within a creative culture, within a career. At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter other people's ideas and thoughts and opinions. What brings you life? For me, it's being a father. And the more that I can tap into that, experience that, the more joy I can bring to my art, to my craft. So that's me. I really thoroughly love being a dad. And drinking from this every morning is just me waking up and planting that inspiration. Just feeling that and reminding myself how much being a father has not only changed my life, but also changed the life around me, my own family, the community around me. And kind of to cap things off, in closing, ideas is how we're really connected. To not get too floaty spiritual conversation, but when you think about it, when you go and see a sculpture, a painting, maybe a building, someone that created that was inspired to create it. And then you look at it and it inspires you to go and create something. And then you create something. Maybe it's a video, maybe it's a scene, maybe it's a book. And then somebody experiences that, and then they get inspired to do something else. Inspiration doesn't work like this. Inspiration works like this. And this is how humanity is connected. We are truly connected by each other's ideas. So the more that you can tap into, I guess you could say, the depth of ideas, the depth of creativity, that in itself, that's the nectar. That's where we really connect. You are now living a different life as a better person, inspired. Your soul is moved simply because of somebody else's inspiration. But understand that their inspiration came from somebody else's inspiration. And this is how the world of creativity works. The more you can tap into that's the good stuff right there. Don't create out of desperation. Create out of inspiration. And again, going back to our original part of the conversation, is not creating because you have to create. It's creating because you're inspired. You're coming from a place of love. A lot of us create for love. Like we want the acceptance. We want people to double tap and like. We want people to say good things. And of course, we all want that. I want that. I can't front. But there's also this reality of doing something for something versus doing it from something. So you don't do it for love. You do it from love. You're coming from a place of inspiration, and therefore it's just real, just authentic, it's just natural. And that right there, that's really how we connect to one another. That's how we connect to humanity. That's how we stay grounded, is being open and available to creativity itself. And just to kind of close, in the beginning I talked about wind chimes. I absolutely love wind chimes. And if you can get some, they're cheap at Publix. You can get them at a garden shop or whatever, The wind chimes, they don't do anything. They're not sitting there being like, I'm a wind chime, ding, ding. They're not making noise. They're just being. And they're being open and they're being available to the wind that comes. And when the wind comes, it makes beautiful noise. And each time it's a different sound. Each time it's a different rhythm. Each time it's a different pattern. But it's just open and available to the wind. And that's how creativity works. You don't sit there and try to make music. You don't sit there and try to write a script. You don't sit there and try to write an idea. You are just open to creativity. You sit there and you be open to inspiration. And inspiration from there and then leads you into actually creating things. If you ever taken an improv class, improv sometimes is not necessarily something that you can just create out of nothing. You do need sometimes a catalyst. So somebody either says something and you bounce off of that idea. Sometimes it's, here's my hat. Let me talk about the hat and then we can build off the hat. Even in that, that's a very in the moment experience. But again, you're just open and you're available to what that brings. In closing, go buy some wind chimes and just observe it. Watch, listen, and then try to make that part of your life, just being open and available. We talked about travel. We talked about creating a space inside your home, creating a space inside here, creating an actual inspiration in what you wear and what you do. One of the things that I really love about filmmaking and why I still do it and why I'm still a huge fan of it is, for me, I believe that filmmaking has the ability to move the soul. And one of the beautiful things is that for a lot of us, we can say, oh, I did this simply because I remember watching this movie. I, decided to be a better person. I decided to work out because of a movie, a video. I got into dance because of video more than actually being. So that's, for me, that's a big part of my inspiration is surrounding myself with content. But it's important too to not just do and be a part of content just because. Like you do need to make sure that you're around. Okay, let me rephrase that. You need to cultivate a life and a creative space that will invite that inspiration that you're looking for. Sometimes that also means decluttering, like getting rid of shit you just don't need, whether that's like actual in your life or actually in your space. Sometimes we just have too many things we can't actually see the inspiration that is already there, already existing. That's another big part, is decluttering. I think another big part too is also not judging yourself, and also being okay with mistakes. Some of my greatest, that I could say my signatures that I've ever made in dance, really they came from mistakes. I didn't mean to make them. A lot of my elbow like slides and stuff, that all came from like post-injury. I wasn't, as a lot of you guys know, I had this big ass elbow pad I used to like do moves on, and I would do stacks at elbow, hand, drop to elbow. I would do a lot of it. But post-injury, I couldn't do it. My body couldn't take it when I got injured. So I would do it, and then I would slip or I would slide. And instead of going against that concept, that idea, instead of going against that, I decided to go with those ideas. And I just went with the slide. And oh man, here's another move. Because I didn't judge the moment. And I just allowed that inspiration. Again, I literally just stumbled into a new idea. That's how ideas work. I think, yes, being open, being at peace, but also just not judging the time and space that you're a part of. Sometimes we want and desire things so much that we just can't like be and say, what's speaking to me right now? What is happening in this moment that maybe I can utilize later on? And you don't really know what that inspiration in the moment is going to take you later on. Again, don't worry about it. Don't plan it. Just document it, take a picture of it, record it, and then later on, you're going to be in this creative process and you're going to say, oh, I remember 2 weeks ago this happened. That's going to fit perfectly in this creation. Again, in dance, you just sit there and you just do movements. You don't try to create anything. You just let ideas connect each other because of previous ideas, and then in the moment thinking, and then you get inspired. So, in closing, I know I said that already, wind chimes. I'm going to keep saying it because it's so important for me. Wind chimes, man, just be. Just let the wind and the inspiration that already is and exists in this world just kind of pass through. As long as you're open and you're available, it will always, as long as you're open and available, you will always be able to feel and experience it. And last thing, this is way more of a spiritual thing, I would say, a spiritual teaching, but I think it works in the same with creativity. If you put your hand out and you're driving, it's one of my favorite things to do. If you drive and you put your hand out and you just feel the wind, you can feel it. And the moment that you try to grab it, you lose it. And that's because, I guess you could say spiritually, So much of life is meant to be felt, but never grasped. So much of life is meant to be experienced and never fully controlled. And ideas and creativity are very similar. They're not meant to be controlled in that moment. They're just meant to be felt and experienced. Later on, maybe you'll be inspired or something, but in that moment, just be open and feel and touch and experience and allow that to just happen. But the moment you try to grab it, you lose it. And that's it. But love you guys. And I'm going to take these conversations, I'm going to collect them, and they're going to be part of the Shade Life Cafe conversations, and they'll be on my YouTube. You can go to my link in the bio and subscribe there, and they'll just be saved there. I might save some of them here on the channel, on as far as Instagram, but for the most part, I do this little setup so that we can record them and we'll document them, and hopefully this of me being inspired to do will also inspire you, because that's how inspiration works. So love you guys, thank you, and we shall talk soon.